White and Blue CFL Podcast, presented right here on thegruelingtruth.net. My name's Oz Davis. I'm a writer here at The Grueling Truth, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Joe Pritchard. Joe, back from the friendly confines of Lambeau Field. How are you?
Oh, I'm just fine. I had an enjoyable weekend and got my CFL fill in various different ways, so I was able to keep up, thankfully.
Yes, so Joe does another show here at The Grueling Truth, the Titletown Huddle, which is the Green Bay Packers-focused podcast we have here. And I'm sure that those who are really interested can hear about it there. But what the hey, since this was the better part of your emotional and actual physical investment this weekend, tell us about the Lambeau experience this time. It wasn't cold as Viking hell this time, I understand.
No, it was just cool enough in the fourth quarter to remind you that it was October.
Right.
But
right.
the Thunder is not frozen, not yet.
Right. You hosted.
Well, my father-in-law, he actually has a cabin just on the other side of the Michigan-Wisconsin Upper Peninsula border up there. So that's about an hour away from Green Bay, so that was a great place. It's much easier to go north than it is south after a Packer game. So that makes a lot of sense, actually, to get out of. Green Bay isn't exactly equipped to handle 80,000 people leaving all at the same time. Let's put it that way.
All right. Tips for driving in Wisconsin, brought to you by Joe Pritchard.
Yes, I do have to make mention that was my fourth visit to Lambeau Field, the third regular season game. So whether or not you count preseason games, I am now either matched or I am just past the amount of times I have visited Mosaic Stadium. So
wow.
Just an interesting tidbit. I went to Mosaic Stadium 3 straight summers, and at that time of my life, it was actually less expensive as far as lodging and ticket prices go to go there than it was to Lambeau, because Lambeau has a definite markup on their tickets, and hotel costs during Packer games are not necessarily easy to come by, which is why it's nice to have a relation, have a location within an hour of Green Bay. That's a definite help.
Right, with professional football, yeah. Very nice, very nice. Actually, I'm glad you brought this up. I'm glad you brought up ticket prices and attending games in Canada, because I did want to ask you this. We're going to talk about the Grey Cup is seemingly right around the corner here, and we're going to talk about Grey Cup and playoff scenarios a bit later in the show. But I was thinking about this today, Joe. Now, you're going to Grey Cup weekend, right?
Yes, we bought tickets in the cheapest section, the $199 Canadian, in the end zones and the temporary seating. The way things are going, though, with so many empty seats, I can imagine there will be some discounts, and there will be people that will probably pay much less for their tickets sitting in much better locations. So it's a price you pay for trying to guarantee yourself a seat to a game you wanted to go to. So that's just one of those things, unfortunately.
Right. This is what I wanted to ask you is, like, how are you going to get tickets?
It's already taken care of.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it seems. Unfortunately, it's already taken care of. Couldn't you do better for your $200 a pop elsewhere on game day, do you think?
I would think that's a likely scenario. At the same time, if I'm going to be investing that much time, that much money, and I'm not going to put it to chance unless they take
you're not going to risk it.
More ridiculous.
Yeah. Sure, of course. It makes rational sense. But I know that, judging from what some podcast chatter and internet chatter is saying these days, I imagine there's going to be quite a few Canadians going the scalper route or the last-minute ticket route on Grey Cup weekend. So I was just thinking about that. Right. Let's talk about news more in the present. Hard to believe name players are still being swapped, and even more interestingly, one of the teams involved, perhaps, the team, I don't know if you can say it, more involved in this trade, is the only team eliminated mathematically from playoff contention. I guess this happened on Monday. Could it have happened on Monday or perhaps today, Tuesday? The news went down that Hamilton Tiger Cats and Saskatchewan Roughriders made a trade. The Roughriders sending Justin Capicotti, who we thought might have been one of the bigger deal signings in the offseason, but really came to naught under the Chris Jones defense, essentially in return for, Lyndon Gaydosh. Yeah, that's right, Lyndon Gaydosh, the defensive lineman. Xavier Fulton was also involved in the deal. Going with Capicotti to Hamilton. So here are more disposable Chris Jones players. Do you think that I'm particularly interested in Capicotti because he's been wasting my time all year in fantasy ball, but I'm wondering, can a guy who was one of the more outstanding Canadian defensive players return to form with Hamilton?
Yeah, that's the danger of going after a free agent out there. If a player doesn't fit your scheme, you're in trouble if you're throwing a lot of money at him. So, from as far as I can tell, and from the chatter I've seen, it just seems like Capicotti and Jones didn't mix as far as what Jones was wanting out of that position. Capicotti, of course, was one of the leading sackmen in Ottawa the past couple of years, but apparently that wasn't how Jones had anticipated using him. And when you try to when you grab a player for name value and not so much because he fits what you're doing, this is the sort of thing that will happen. Now, you didn't make mention, though, of the draft picks going back from Hamilton to Saskatchewan. There was a 4th and a 7th as well in there. Now, they're not high draft picks, but since Saskatchewan has traded away a bunch of draft picks and seemingly wasted a few last year as well, it's definitely a step in the right direction to try to rebuild the complete lack of Canadian talent they have, which is, of course, a vital part of a successful CFL team. So it's a trade that makes sense for both sides. Hamilton is trying desperately to take advantage of the gaping hole in the East as far as winning teams go. So Hamilton's in one position, Saskatchewan's in the other, and oddly enough, Saskatchewan has been playing much better than Hamilton lately, which makes the trade not seem to make sense on a lot of levels, but when you bring it down to straight numbers, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, there are certain things in play here. You talk about how you can't just draft a free agent based on sheer talent. You've got to make sure he fits your scheme. Now, allegedly, Chris Jones has plans. Allegedly, Chris Jones has a scheme, but it's been really, really, really hard to get a gauge on what that scheme is when all season he's been playing mixy-matchy with his roster. Tough to get a hold on that. The other thing that I'm wondering is, similar to the wisdom of the Toronto deal here is the wisdom of Hamilton making this play. I mean, here they are. Okay, so they want to make changes on defense, but the problem with this team hasn't necessarily been defense, right? I mean, we've been talking about this all season. The problem with this team has been playing an incomplete game. And whether that's offense, defense, or special teams, something is lacking in at least one quarter of the game from each of these sides of the ball. I can't understand why, shuffling in a couple of new guys is going to suddenly change your fortune and give you a win in the playoffs against probably the Edmonton Eskimos. I mean, I just don't see it. Clearly this is a move for the future for Hamilton as well, because I don't understand the immediate benefit for them. They really going to get something out of this?
I do though.
Okay.
The difference between this year's defense and last year's defense is simply they're not putting the quarterback on the ground nearly as much as they were last year.
Right.
They're not forcing as many turnovers, and that was dictated by pressure. So they're going for a quick fix in Capicotti, and if it works out, it's going to work wonders. Especially filling a Canadian slot. Now, it's a long shot to work. especially given there's only a few games left. So Capricotti would have to make an impact right away to make this really turn out great. But at least it's a step in trying to remedy something that's been just completely lacking from their game this year.
I mean, especially the next game is against Ottawa. This is a game that has, like, all the playoff ramifications for these two teams. And you know, they're going to need immediate results out of this guy. I mean, it's quite the last-minute shot in the dark here. Even if there is an improvement, they'd have to stretch quite a bit, I think, to really make an impact in the playoffs this year.
Well,
even if they make the playoffs.
The East is wide open, though. They're only a half game behind Ottawa, and if they sweep them over the next couple of games, they're in prime position to be hosting one game to go to the Grey Cup.
Oh, well, the playoff scenarios have come out today. We'll talk about those later, but I do know this. All Hamilton needs is to win this weekend to have at least one home game. So they clinch no worse than second place if they win this week, more or less. This also depends on Toronto and Montreal.
If you could put yourself in a position where you only need to win one game at home to go to the Grey Cup, though, that's a huge step up for where this team feels like it belongs right now.
Sure, anything can happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want to be any team in the East right now and have to play that fourth seed in the West, whoever it may be. I mean, do you realize? And again, we can talk about this later. We keep getting drawn back into this. I mean, do you realize that BC could be over there? That BC could end up being the 3 seed in the East. I mean, are they going to be afraid of going to Hamilton to play a game? I don't think so. And I don't think Winnipeg would be, and I don't think Edmonton would be either. It's almost unfortunate that the second-place team from the East has to make the playoffs. They might be better served not even playing that game. In any case, well, we know that anything can happen in the playoffs. Right. Let's talk last week's games. Now, we're going to run through this quickly because we need this line for other fantastic podcasts here at thegrilling.truth.net, like the Rouge, White-Blue CFL Podcast, to which you are currently listening, but also because since Joe's exciting weekend took him away and then his return to work on Monday, because being an American, he did not get that day off. I actually did, along with my kids, to be honest. He did not see the games in full or had to catch them on replay or caught the edited version or whatnot. So we'll just run through these. First game was a good one. Saskatchewan Roughriders 32, Ottawa Redblacks 30. Ironically, the Roughriders choose this time of the season to have their best game. You watched some of this. How did you like the newcomers? How did you like what Jeff Fuller did out there? How did you like Willie Jefferson out there? Kind of like Mwamba. Didn't show up on the stat sheet. Mwamba didn't, but still made his presence felt on a couple of plays. Did you like seeing the new guys out there?
Well, Fuller doesn't really matter because I believe he's out for the rest of the year now, which is fairly typical of his CFL experience thus far here. But remember way back in the preseason when all the predictions were saying the Riders are going to start out rough, but then they're going to catch fire in the second half and contend. Well, they just took a couple more weeks than a lot of people thought. I pegged them at 7-11. And when they were at about 1-8, 1-9, 1-10, I was not feeling so hot about that. But now they've caught fire, apparently, and won the last 3, so that's still in play. And I'm not feeling too bad about that, especially if they can keep that fire up. Me and Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans, seeing that they have nothing to lose, and they're going to face BC in the last 2 games of the season, why not? Let's see if they can make that 7-11.
Yeah, they will, because BC will tank. BC will tank those 2 games so they can go in as the number 3 seed in the East.
I don't think that's Wally Buono's game.
Nah. Unfortunately, that would look as thinking as a pragmatic American NFL fan. I mean, Jesus, I'm thinking that one of those 3 teams should try and tank. One of those 3 teams, Winnipeg, Edmonton, BC, should try and tank because you don't want to have to play Calgary on the way to Grey Cup. I don't think. But they won't do that. They won't do that because fair play, which is good. Trust me. I don't want to see tanking. That would be ugly. I don't want to see BC lose back-to-back to Saskatchewan based on, slacking. Let's see. What about Ottawa? What is going on here? Is it a conspiracy not to win the East? I mean, here's Travis. Here's Trevor Harris. I'm sorry. Here's Trevor Harris. 9 of 15, 5 turnovers, 2 sacks in the first 3 quarters. Ultimately, gives way to Henry Burris. Now what? Oh, and by the way, they only lost one of, if not the go-to guy in the CFL, Mr. Williams, probably out for the season now. Whither art thou, Ottawa? Do they lose this week, do you think, against Hamilton and just number 2?
I don't know. Good Lord. This team has had so many opportunities to just run away with the East. And the way the season started, that's what everybody thought they were going to do. They started out hot. Trevor Harris was making the throws to Chris Williams. Teams were leaving Williams alone on the short routes, and Williams was breaking long touchdowns. We haven't seen that for a while. The concern I had about Ottawa in the offseason was their defense not being a shutdown type of defense and losing pieces. That's still in play here as well. So going back and forth between Harris and Burris, it hasn't been as explosive of an issue as I thought it was going to be, especially given Burris's past when he has been taken out of starting jobs. It's good to see that it did not cause too many issues. But going back and forth between a 41-year-old starting caliber quarterback and the guy that you're hoping will be your future, but who has in the second straight year started to fade down the stretch. If I'm an Ottawa fan, I'm worried about what next year holds. This year, they could be one game away from a Grey Cup if they could pull off a couple of wins here late in the season and win the division that nobody seems to want to win. But if I'm an Ottawa fan, I'm not feeling too confident about anything right now.
All they have to do is win this game this week. All they have to do, either of those two teams, Ottawa or Hamilton, have to do is win one game at some point in the rest of this season, and they're probably going to win over.
Don't they go home and home here, though?
Yes, yeah. This is the bookend. So if they split, they're both in. I think they got to be. The maximum, if Toronto and Montreal lose this week, okay, if they lose one more game, the best that either can do is 7-11. Okay, the worst, if one of these teams loses once, is the worst they can do is 7-11. Now, for Ottawa, that would be 7-10-1. So they both win the tiebreakers against these teams. So it seems to me that if they split this series,
given that Calgary's coming up on both Toronto and Montreal schedule, I think twice for both.
Yeah,
I think we know who the two teams in the East are going to be.
Yeah.
But it's a question of who's going to have that golden ticket to host one home game for the chance to go to a Grey Cup.
Not such a great chance. Right. Okay, how about this one? Winnipeg Blue Bombers 37, BC Lions 35. I'm sure you watched this one in full and enjoyed it thoroughly. What did you get out of this? What did you get out of this one? Because not only did Winnipeg have a nice, healthy lead over a winning team for a long time, which is not something that they've really done very often this season, but BC was down by more points than they've experienced this entire season, except for the Calgary game in Week 9, and could not make the comeback.
Oh, they
what would you take away?
Very nearly did, though. They very nearly did. I was pleased with the Bombers, their performance. Very happy to see them because a lot of people have said that they haven't been too faithful about the Bombers since they've only beaten bad teams. Well, they just beat BC, so we can wipe that out. They've hung real tight with Calgary, and Edmonton beat them, but Edmonton's house on fire lately. So I'm feeling really okay after that stretch of 3 games. I'm feeling really okay about this Bomber team. BC, of course, showed how explosive they can be. Jennings took a while to get warm, but once he did, Burnham and Arsenault torched a pretty good Winnipeg secondary. So the rematch this week is going to be a great one to watch as well. And as much as I hate to admit it, Harris fumbled. Winnipeg, and now that doesn't give BC the win, but it puts them in a heck of a position to go ahead late because, remember, they were stopped. They were stopped after three downs, going in trying to go ahead to begin with, putting Winnipeg in the position they were to try to run out the clock. Now, does Winnipeg have 3 more stops in them? Maybe, maybe not. But BC has to earn that victory. So it's just unfortunate they didn't have a chance to do it because it really kind of put a sour end to a pretty fantastic game.
Nah, I mean that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I mean, BC had opportunities. Like I was saying before, they have not been in, with the exception of that Calgary game, they have not been in a hole as large as 24-3 this entire season. In fact, they've only been down, with the exception of that one game again, they've only been down by more than 2 touchdowns once. That was against Toronto, and it was for about 3.5 minutes. No, 3 minutes, 5 seconds was what I counted. This is not a team used to playing from behind. I suppose it's unfortunate that they didn't get another shot. I suppose it's unfortunate that they couldn't kick a field goal for the win. But, to dig yourself a hole.
Kick the field goal for the win, though, because Winnipeg took a safety late. The thing is, in the last 7 games, let's say, the Lions are 4-3, and the Bombers are 5-2. But the Bombers look a heck of a lot more impressive, even in their losses, than the Lions do in that stretch, by a long shot. I mean, it's no wonder Winnipeg is number 2 in most power rankings right now. I mean, they're the better team right now, right? You can say it. I'm okay with them being in the conversation. I mean, I picked them for 8 wins. They're at 9.
You clinched the playoff spot.
Yeah. The rest, that's what I wanted out of the season. Is I wanted a playoff spot, and everything else now is house money.
I guess, but they're still the second best team in the CFL.
Yeah, I'd love to see them have a chance to be first, but right now I'll pocket what I brought with me, and I'll play with the house money for the rest of the year here.
Good on you. You know who won't be playing on house money for the rest of the year? I won't be playing on house money for the rest of the year. Edmonton Eskimos 46, Montreal Alouettes 20. So much for optimism. So much for the glorious return of our estranged receiver, Kenny Stafford. Total destruction. And the other game was even worse, I would say, because there was no illusion of competition at all. Calgary Stampeders 48, Toronto Argonauts 20. How long before you shut this one off on the replay? Or was this one that you were listening to on the radio?
Yeah, these were both radio games for me. Thankfully, Morley Scott and Dave Campbell took me through the Edmonton-Montreal game as much as I was able to listen. And then the Calgary-Toronto game, I listened to Mike Hogan. They were both good as well. They were very vocal about their displeasure. Well, they weren't angry about anything, but they were making it rather clear who was the more competitive team, and hint, it wasn't the team that were covering. So it was an enjoyable experience listening to them, even though the games themselves were not all that enjoyable. And it made me feel just a bit better about having to be at work in the afternoon to take care of some things where I had planned to be off the entire day so that I could watch said games. But that's just the way that things work. And if I was going to have to go into work, I wasn't too upset about those two games being blowout.
Yeah, and now the Alouettes and the Argonauts are one loss away from playoff elimination. I believe at any point in the season, all it's going to take is one more loss to take them out, unless a lot of things happen. I suppose there could be ties in there and things like that. Right. On to next week?
And next week.
Okay, we are back. Quick run-through of the playoff scenarios. Here they are. Edmonton is in with a win. Okay, Edmonton is in with a win and I think everything depends on a Toronto and Montreal losing. As soon as Toronto and Montreal lose at any point from this week on, then things pretty much instantly fall into place, right? Because, let's see here, according to the official website, all we need for Edmonton to get in at that number 3 or to clinch that number 3 in the East is Montreal to lose and Toronto to lose, which is interesting that Edmonton could actually gain a place on the eastern side before Ottawa or Hamilton. No, I guess they can't. Because Ottawa and Hamilton will play the first game this week. So either of these teams winning, plus the Alouettes and the Argonauts losing, clinches the winning team of the Ottawa-Hamilton game at least second place in the East. Okay, so it's possible, even if Montreal and Toronto lose, that if Ottawa or Hamilton loses, they could still not make the playoffs. Although, like I just said, a lot of things would have to happen. Now, this week, BC and Winnipeg both clinched playoff spots because of various results from the games. I mean, BC had to back in, for example. But I guess we're still going to have to wait these final 4 games to find out which is number 2 and which is number 3, especially with Edmonton still in the mix there. What, 2 games separate these 3 teams? Is it even 2 games, or is it 1 game at this point?
I believe, and I'm not looking at it right at the moment here. But
yeah, I'm calling it up here.
Yeah, if you could, because I believe BC is still theoretically a half a game up on Winnipeg.
Yes, yeah, BC is half game up, but I guess Winnipeg has a tiebreaker.
What is the record here?
Mm-hmm.
What is BC's record here?
BC is 9-5. Winnipeg is 9-6.
9-5. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought here. And Edmonton would be 8-7 then, correct?
8-7. Yep.
Okay, so Winnipeg and BC are playing for the tiebreaker this week. I know that BC has a game in hand, but should Winnipeg win and go to 10-6, knocking BC down to 9-6, that game in hand all of a sudden isn't that big of a deal because Winnipeg would be up a half a game and would have the tiebreaker over BC. Now, if BC wins by more than 2, they have the tiebreaker, and Winnipeg's now a game and a half behind. So BC could put Winnipeg very nearly out of the picture for second place with the win, or Winnipeg could make their position a little bit more comfortable because they still have to watch out for Edmonton, who has their tiebreaker. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Edmonton can go a maximum of 11-7 at this point. They get the bye this week, so they're in the best position of all. They get to figure out what to do next after these games this week. So they're actually in among all the teams still in contention, which is basically everybody except for Calgary and Saskatchewan, to improve their position. Edmonton, I think, is in the best spot because they don't have to play. Let's talk about that first game. Ottawa Redblacks at Hamilton Tiger Cats. The Tiger Cats have theoretical home field advantage for they're 3-3 there this season. haven't exactly enjoyed the mystique that they did last year at home. Let's see. I mean, we're going to be bringing in the new acquisitions for Hamilton. We'll see if this helps them out, Andy. Hamilton went into the bye on a 1-3 run, so you figure the off week has to help out a little bit with the team that's been, pretty spanked by injuries lately. So hopefully things will have improved after that bye week. I'm gonna be boring here and go with the home team, Hamilton, winning. I think that there may be turmoil in Ottawa again.
I don't think there's turmoil in Ottawa. I just don't think their defense is good enough to keep them in games if the offense is sputtering. It seems like the back-and-forth quarterback thing, which is usually a recipe for disaster, hasn't been so bad because they've been able to go back to a hot hand if they have a quarterback not doing so well. So I don't think there's much problem there as far as beyond the football sense here. I don't have faith in Hamilton to put together a complete game. Their special teams have been an issue. Their defense has been an issue, and their offense is an issue from time to time too. So I think in Ottawa it's going to win this one and punch themselves a nice golden ticket potentially here.
Okay. Hamilton is a 2.5 favorite in this one. All right, how about this one, game 2? Here we go. Here's probably the game of the week. I think it's definitely your game of the week. Winnipeg Blue Bombers at BC Lions. Joe, I'm going to make this one easy, man. I don't think that Wally Blona loses 2 games in a row to this team. I'm going BC. I'm going BC by probably – they'll probably control this game throughout, I'm going to say, just to troll you a little bit.
Oh, you're not trolling me at all. I actually think about this one too. Given that these teams were so tight in Winnipeg, and BC has done decently well at home this year, Wally's getting a second crack at these guys the week after, and not to put the coaching staff on Michael Shea down, they made some pretty interesting calls this week that ended up working out beautifully. And I think he's improving as a CFL head coach, and that staff is starting to gel. Then again, you've got Wally Blano on the other side, and you have Jennings and Arsenault, along with Burnham, who torched the secondary this week. And we know that Mozaik is at least somewhat nicked up. He wasn't practicing today here, even though he did come back and make that huge tackle on Rainey near the end of the game.
Yeah, playing the game.
So if there's any problem with that, that could make things even a bit worse. And I do think that Winnipeg's got a good secondary. I just think Arsenault is a fantastic receiver. Jennings is a great quarterback at this point, and Burnham has definitely stepped up in his third year as well.
And how about the running game? That was one of the
running game has been back and forth too. You just don't know if you're going to see Johnson or Allen this next week.
Right, but they showed the graphic. Go for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say they could bring in Johnson this week and have fresh legs against the Winnipeg defense that last week geared up to defend Allen. That's a wonderful weapon to have.
Right. Yeah, they showed during the TSN broadcast of this game, they showed the graphic of the last 6 games, three by each of these backs, and absolutely identical statistics. I mean, down within like 10 yards gained of each other. Really fantastic, really great that they have this. And you may remember at the beginning of the season, they had one running back representing something like 80% of their rushing yards last year, and that was Mr. Harris, who went over to your Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And, we were figuring this season they were going to have possibly the weakest running game in the CFL. The other team that was suspected to be in a similar boat was Edmonton. Same thing happening over there now. Here are 2 teams that have 1-2 combinations from out of nowhere. Just fantastic stuff. Just fantastic stuff for the Lions, but I suspect not so great for your Bombers this week.
To wrap this one up, then I do think BC wins this one by around 10. They'll make
Don't make that last play this week where they weren't able to last week.
Yeah. I can't suspect a fail like this 2 weeks in a row. Right. Okay. So then after this, possible elimination game: Saskatchewan Roughriders at Toronto Argonauts. Again, pretty much a Toronto Argonauts loss puts them out of the picture in the East. Saskatchewan, of course, is already mathematically eliminated, which is kind of a shame, because they're playing better than a couple of teams in the East right now, and you know which teams I mean.
Right, and these two teams are going in completely separate directions. The paperwork says that Toronto's at 5-10. Correct me if I'm wrong, and Saskatchewan's at 4-10. But Saskatchewan's playing good football, and Toronto's 1-8 in their last 9 games. So this is not a hard one for me at all. I think the Riders win this one.
Yep. Riders win this. This will be their first. They're already on their first winning streak of more than 2 games since back in 2013, I believe. The playoffs. It was the playoffs. The last time they won three times in a row was on the way to the Grey Cup. That was the last time they won 3 games in a row. So nice long streak here. I can't see it ending here. Saskatchewan has a nice schedule the rest of the way, except for those last 2 games at BC. Right, okay. I'm definitely going Saskatchewan here as well. Final game. Oh boy, here we go. Final game. Montreal Alouettes at Calgary Stampeders. I guess in a lot of ways it's good that Calgary has already clinched a playoff spot a long time ago, because, wow, they're closing the season with an easy one, it seems like. Generally an easy schedule as they attempt to get the 18-game record in the CFL. This is within reach. I can't see any reason why the Alouettes would win this game. I'm going to say Calgary. I'm interested here. What's the line? I guess the over-under for this game should be points on Calgary. Will they go over 40 as they have been lately? They're a 15.5-point favorite in this game. Whoa! I have not seen a line that big in CFL in years. I think that's reasonable. I say Calgary by about, 30?
I could see the game developing the same way the Edmonton-Montreal game did, where the Alouettes hang in there for as long as they can, and all of a sudden it's just over in a blink of an eye. But yeah, I'm not getting off the horse, and neither are you.
Well, I mean, there's nothing you can do when your defense is on the field for literally 2/3 of the game. I mean, at one point, they had been on the field for almost 3/4 of the time, about halfway through the third. At that point, they had been on the field for about 75% of the game. Of course they can't hang. But, again, this has been the problem with the Alouettes. They've been right around averaging about 16 points a game all year. And it's just like you have a hard time imagining even where those 16 points come from. And it's sick considering you've got Deron Carter out there. You've got Kenny Stafford out there. You've got a guy who's got, 17, 18 years of CFL coaching experience on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, it's just amazing that we can't get more than a couple touchdowns a game. This is why they can't stay competitive. And it's a shame that this defense is going to waste. And it's a shame that Noel Thorpe is not going to be with this team next year because my God, it's going to be the apocalypse next season.
I'd like to see what happened if they kept Chatelain on for at least this year, or for at least next year and the year after, and started building an offense that suits the way he calls games. Because I think
they will.
That could be the way that would turn this franchise around. If they're going to keep playing musical coaches, they're going to be like this for years.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. This is the problem. Yeah, they need to sign him on, but the problem is that I don't even know if they have any set salary cap room next year either. I think we might still be in purgatory. I wouldn't be surprised to see like a 2-16 out of these guys in a couple of years. In any case, right. All right. This weekend, you're plugging into the CFL, right, Joe? You're going to catch all the games.
As much as I usually do.
Or at least the first, half anyway of the Montreal-Calgary game. I wouldn't blame you for skipping out on that one. Right. Okay. Titletown Huddle, Joe's other show here at thegruelingtruth.net, based on the Packers. When is this one coming out, Joe?
Usually we record Wednesday evenings, so that usually comes out on Thursdays.
Okay. We've got lots of other football-related programming here at thegruelingtruth.net, including the CFL Pick'em show, which has myself on it, and usually Dieter Brock of CFL quarterbacking fame. We've also got, like I say, we've got lots of other stuff, and I'm sure as heck not going to delineate it all right now. What you have been listening to is the Rouge, White, and Blue CFL podcast. I have been your co-host, Oz Davis, and for my co-host, Joe Pritchard, we are out of here. Enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you next week.